Hi everyone, and welcome to Microsoft Power Show. This is a special edition as I have UIUX on the call with me. It's going to be a series, and the goal is to show you how to build Power Apps from scratch. There are some components that you might not have paid attention to, especially things around architecture. How do you think through your application? Where do I start from? How do I gather requirements? And this is where it is important to emphasize and show you how you can do that. There are several approaches to doing this. Some today use Agile and Scrum approach, but I believe not everybody have a full functional team. Maybe you are just one person who is interested in building an application, but you want to do it the right way. So our guide will be very helpful. Hi, Elaine.
Hi, Ola. Thanks a lot for inviting me on the show. Really excited to do this, and I hope everyone learned something from it as much as I've learned putting this together as well.
All right, thank you. It is my pleasure as well. Also to note that UIUX is a Microsoft MVP, and she has been contributing a lot into the community, including the TGD group and Power App for Kids. She'll be sharing more, I believe. Before moving to our session, she should tell us more about herself and what she does, and fun things like that. Right. So right now, I'm going to move on to the next slide just to get us through. Okay, what's the background? And I've sort of talked about this background before, that solutions are actually first conceived before implemented. And that is the same thing when it comes to application development. You break down the application requirement. What does this application want to be able to do? What are the components? And if you are able to understand the different components, you can then know what to do at every point in time. While learning Power Apps, we often come up with an app idea. You commence building you then commence building without any documentation. You just have an idea, you then start building. And that used to be my experience as well. I kept asking myself whenever I'm building that thing, can I refer to a document? Do I even know what is the definition of done? Things like that. Nothing is guiding you through the solution. You don't know, you just, let me add this part to it. Let me add approval to it. But you never thought of it in the beginning. And if you don't plan it well, you might not have a best or optimal application. And we're all victims of this, especially during our early days in learning Power Apps. So this series of videos will teach you how to build a simple yet functional Power application from scratch, with focus on how you can even develop the solution architecture. This is what we're going to cover: the functional requirements, how do you gather the business requirements, how to do some sort of wireframe if it's required, how about center of excellence. It is also a very important topic that we're going to touch base with. And finally, the application lifecycle management. Also, in this series, you're going to be learning how to build this particular use case, which is employee appraiser solution. The basic requirement of this application they are listed below. So employees should be able to log their monthly performance appraisal on the app. This is something that you can do today, I assume. And if you cannot, you're going to learn it. But what will make this different is that we're going to go through all the elements and components we talked about. This is requirement gathering. These are the functional requirements. There's other form of requirements. How do I plan the life cycle? How do I plan the governance of the application? How do I detect or do the wireframe? So we'll go through these components while building these solutions together. All right. It's a very long one, but I believe you can pause the video to check the list of requirements that we have listed here. It might change by the time we start building the application itself. Now it is time to hear UIUX. I know you would like to talk to us about this Canvas app requirements and design. But before that, can you tell us a bit about yourself and we move on to the slide?
So, Elaine, I'm actually Malaysian. So I'm from Melbourne. I'm actually living in Melbourne now. One interesting fact is I've actually lived in 3 countries: Malaysia, Singapore, and now Melbourne. So I kind of be part of both worlds, Asian world and the Western world, if that makes sense. Yeah, so like what Ola has mentioned, I'm a Microsoft application MVP, same like Ola, we're in the same family. I am a Power Platform specialist. So I've actually worked a lot in the Power Platform space, specialized in Power Apps, and I enjoy working with the community as well. I enjoy giving back to the community. I enjoy sharing with the community and learning from the community. So that's me.
Wow, thank you. I love that. I never knew. Fun fact about you: 3 countries: Australia, Singapore, and Malaysia.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that now. Thank you, Elaine. And all right. So when it comes to building a Canvas app, right here, requirement workshop process. So it is important to understand what is needed, know what people want to talk about, what is the function of this app, why are we even building these things, and we'd like to share your experience with us as a consultant in this space, what these 3 phases actually means.
Yeah, so I think like every other project, if you are in a project world, like any other project, requirement process is the same. You have the planning session, you have the workshop, and then you have the outcome, right? So it's very important for you to do proper planning before your workshop. Obviously, every project is different. Sometimes you might have a 1-week workshop, you might have 2 weeks workshop. It doesn't matter. You still have to do your proper requirement planning. So I always advise the first thing to do, the very first thing you have to do is to read up the scope of work. At least know your requirements beforehand. Even a high-level requirement, you might not have a proper sign-off scope of work. It might be something simple, just your client telling you, I want to, like for this one, I want an employee appraisal solution. Probably it's just your boss telling you like, hey, I want an employee appraisal solution. I need to do that. But always know it beforehand. Know who is your client, know who is the stakeholder. If you're working internally, your client is obviously the business unit users. If your consultants, then your client is obviously your customer, right? It's another organization. And know who is the one that is using the system. That's very important, because who you talk to, that's how you're going to phrase your workshop. If they are business users, they are on the ground users, you're going to ask different questions. They are IT, you're going to ask different questions. If they're the C-level, you're going to approach it differently. Then next thing is you have to find out what is your environment landscape. So before I move on, like we're talking about function requirements, we're talking about functional and non-functional. Functional is what you want the app to do. Then there's non-functional, which is like which is things like probably what is your environment landscape, what is your security, what is your governance, is this a new app, do you need data import, and etc. And then after all this, all these, tailor out your questions, before going to workshop. If you have any diagrams you want to draw, high-level business process, you want to confirm, do everything before you enter the workshop. So that's planning. So once that's done, you actually enter the workshop. And then very important is every time you have to understand the use case and the pain point that needs to be addressed. So always ask the customer, why do you need the app? And what is the pain point that you are facing now? Then you know how to address it using the app. You might not need to solve every problems, because you can't. There's always this concept called MVP, most valuable product, which means building something that is usable and then you can enhance it later, and you have all the core functions in it, but still always understand what is the problem that they have. Then know the users in their room. Like probably there's I should have said that the first thing, like you go into the room, first of all, get everyone to introduce themselves, know their roles. Again, different people in the room, you ask different questions. You probably ask the business user why they want the app. You ask the IT users what is the environment they have, right? So always get the right user in the room. And then clarify the business process and what they want in the future environment landscape. So if today they don't have Office 365, you want to build a Canvas app, well, not going to work, right? So they need to provision Office 365. And then from the environment landscape, you know what data sources you need to use. Do they have Dataverse, or they want to be on SharePoint, right? Again, with that, you have to see what is the scalability, what is the future roadmap. You don't want to go onto one data source and then realize that, in the future, I might want to move to Azure. Then how I want to move it, right? You want to start right. Or maybe they say, I want to start off something low cost. So we start with SharePoint first, or Dataverse for Teams. And then how we going to move forward and migrate everything, things like that. Always need to understand that. And lastly, confirm the scope and the interface design. So interface design is something very different when you build Canvas app compared to, let's say, model-driven app or any external, maybe even any out-of-the-box system. Because Canvas app is a blank app, you can build whatever you want. So theming, branding, colors, look and feel, accessibility, some of these things are very important, which I'll touch further on later in a future slide. But you need to kind of draw it out. The client need to know, or if the client have UI theme in place, they might have draw it out and show you, but still you have to confirm because Canvas app has its limitation, right? It's not like a .NET system or mobile Android system. You can build anything and everything that you want. Like for example, you can't drag and drop in Canvas app, things like that. So if the UI guys or the client say, I want to drag this over there, like, oh no, we can't. We find a workaround. So you need to confirm the scope. Then lastly, after the workshop, whether it's 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, you need to have an outcome. The outcome will be things like user stories and acceptance criteria. So like what Ola had mentioned, there are many different methodologies that you can use to run your requirement, to run a project. If you are using Agile and Scrum, then you have things like user story. For example, like as an employee, I want to be able to log my monthly performance appraisal using an app so that blah, blah, blah. And then you have acceptance criteria, which is for the users to test and see that this user story meets the requirement. But maybe, you don't use such a complicated methodology, that is fine. You just need a requirement list. You need a checklist, basically for them to sign off, for the user to cross-check and know that what you built meets their need. Then you need an app storyboarding or wireframe, which is kind of like a flow of your app with the interface and layout. Environment landscape design. So this is more like architecture diagram. If it's a SharePoint, where is it linked to? Do you have external connectors? Is it native? Like for this employee appraisal app, is SharePoint list. I think there's no, and it's probably gonna be connected to Office 365. So those are the environment landscape. Data model design. What are the tables? What are the columns that you need? You need the employee name, you need the appraisal column, you need the manager approval, and obviously the backlog. Backlog is very important because, like I mentioned, not every requirement needs to be built at this point, right? So we need to classify which is a must-have, which is should-have, which is nice to have, which is just a wish list, and all this will go into a backlog, and later on we'll go back, and that's how we can enhance our app. So that is my take on the requirement process. Ola, do you have anything you want to add? Like, you might have a different experience,
Very, very obvious. Yes, I do. And then maybe it's a learning for me from your explanation. We have a lot of people who work in organization where there's no standardized team. Maybe they're just the one alone. They're the only one building Power Apps.
Yeah.
And then, so in that scenario, like me, what I always ensure, or what I'm taking out of this process is, I might not have a full functional team. It might not be a standardized or a formalized project that, I have to call for a workshop, but it is good to have a documentation. Whosoever is requesting for that process, can you help me? Either you document for that person while he's saying those things, or the person document by, send you an email, or let it be this, or you have a quick call with that person. What do you want the application to be able to do? Put those things down and note the ones that are possible and the ones that are not. Oh, we can't achieve this one yet. Can we just, is it a must? Is it must have? Yeah, using the Moscow, if you're a business analyst, the Moscow terminologies. Is it a must have? Is it can have? You have that kind of classification. And you can then advise as well, okay, for now, how many users are going to be using this application? You know that. Let us use SharePoint. Or will it require custom connectors? Does that mean we have to have Power Apps, a license or things like that? You need to also check those requirements against those spendings or those likely costs for the project. So I agree with you, Elaine. In fact, this is going to help me to formalize, and that's the goal, so that I can formalize this role. you're able to do it the right way so that you can get the best possible result. And I deeply appreciate that.
Yeah, I think like what you mentioned just now is like a lot of these Canvas app, you're talking about kind of a small implementation, not a huge one. So a lot of things go by interview, right? Like you interview the business user on what they want. So probably it's not that structured, but yeah, it's good to have an outcome of at least the user know what you're building, and it can't avoid conflicts at the end as well. So that's just, yeah. You don't need to follow this strictly for all those who are watching this, but you take the bits and pieces and make it fit into your organization and your project. So on my next slide, what I have is some of the examples of workshop questions. Like I mentioned, there's functional and non-functional requirements. Some of these already been touched by Ola on how to do the questioning, but I've structured some of these questions based on the use case. Functional requirements is more on the functionality. For example, I just name a couple, like what is the size of attachment that can be uploaded via the app? Because you mentioned in the requirement number 9 that employees should be able to upload attachment. But so we need to know the size, because there's a limitation of uploading attachment to SharePoint, and user needs to know that. So these are examples of functional requirement, like is there a turnaround time? Like, does the manager need notification? Do they able to cancel the submission after they have submitted? Are they able to do that? So these are functional requirements. And then you have the non-functional requirement, which normally you ask the IT team, not the users. So things like security requirement, right? Who can see what data? How many users are using the app? Do you need accessibility and usability requirements? So by right, for me, every app that you build should meet a certain level of accessibility and usability, because like I mentioned in many of my discussions about accessibility, is that accessibility doesn't just mean a special group of people. It's everyone, right? Imagine if this slide, the font size is like 8. So even a full proper sighted person can't see it. So we always have to put that into consideration, is to what extent we go. If you're gonna have a yellow button with a white color wording like what I did here, not very accessible. Now I see it, but yeah, so it doesn't make sense. And then obviously there's governance, right? Governance is a very broad topic which Ola and I gonna cover in the next episode. That is a whole thing about how you're gonna manage the app, how you're gonna manage people building the app, how you wanna manage your licensing, your storage. So you require some form of governance. And then obviously you need to know, is this a brand new app, right? Are you extending an existing app? Is there already an employee appraisal app and you're extending it? Because when you're extending it again, the way you approach it will be different. And if it's not a brand new app, is it sitting somewhere else? Is the data already there? How you previously use it? Maybe it was done in Excel, and now I want all my data in SharePoint. So now you need to do data import. So those are the examples of non-functional requirements. So these are some of the questions that you should tailor before the workshop.
Nicely. Awesome. Thank you so much for splitting them into functional and non-functional. There are several questions there that I never asked. And right now I can see, and I've seen some of them causing issue because I didn't ask earlier on. And after I came up with the application, I then get feedback. Can we do this? Can we do that? Then I tell them, you didn't tell me this before. You didn't tell me.
I didn't ask.
Yeah, exactly. But you didn't tell me. But did you ask? So it's good to have these questions. Thank you so much, Elaine. And right now, I'm picking up another project. Not too formal, but at least I need to ask this question, because the more you ask, the better you know about the solution, and
Yes.
You shorten the back and forth when it comes to testing if it's functional or not, and if it meets the expected outcome. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
No worries.
Okay. You
All
also
right.
have this about UI. What you see, considerations.
Yeah, so all of us who have a mobile phone, we have apps. What's the first thing you see on the app, Ola? When you use the app, what's the first thing that come to your mind?
the experience. I mean, more or less the interface, the color. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
experience.
So if we are so concerned about experience in our gaming app, our social media app, why do we build boring business apps?
That is
So
question. Very true.
yes.
Very true.
So how I design my app is I always put myself as the user. I have very short span of attention. If the app takes more than a minute to load, I'm done. I delete the app from my mobile. So or if the app just gets stuck, I'm done. Like I don't want to use it. If the app have images all over the place and you have views, columns all over the place, it doesn't look organized, I don't want to use the app. So I like pretty apps, and I think business apps should be pretty as well. So UI and UX is very important, right? I'm not saying everyone needs to be a UI UX designer. We are not UI UX designer. Some organizations are lucky enough to have UI UX designer to design apps for them. But even if you don't, some very basic thing we should actually follow. For example, theme and branding. Colors, like your company AXA, I think the main color is dark blue, is it? Is it dark blue? Yeah. So they would assume that app would have to follow that color kind of theme with their logo branding on it. And then even talk about your components, the color of your text box, the color of your label, the size, your font size. Yeah, everything has to be set. So there's a lot of ways to do this, right? I know myself from experience, it's very painful setting up the themes. Now there's something called Center of Excellence COE Toolkit theming component that you can use to set up the themes and apply it to all the apps that you build in the environment. So that's one of the easiest way to do it. But if you don't have it, it's okay. I mean, you haven't had it installed, there's always every project is different, every organization is different. If you don't have it, then set it up at the beginning on the onstart. Set up your color button, set up your themes using components, reusable components. Even I actually also set up the X and Y, height and width, so that all the labels have the same height and width, and all my text boxes have the same height and width and same X and Y. Actually, that's the most painful part, because if you have left and right columns, you can imagine the calculation of maths that you need to put in.
True.
I've realized that it takes a lot of time to do that, but it's important, right? Like, can you imagine opening an app and all your columns are all over the place? And another thing to take note is things like buttons. So when you change the color of the buttons, you change it from blue to green. When you press on it, it might be different color. True. And you hover on it, it's different color. Yes. Yeah, it's just little things, it makes a difference. So those are things that we need to consider. And lastly, like I mentioned, accessibility, very important. Use colors that are colorblind friendly. Use high contrast colors. There's a tool, I think it's called Google Color, just Google Accessibility Color Add-on Check or something, or WCAG Color Check. There's an add-on on Google that you can use on your Google browser, on your Chrome browser, that you can use to check the colors to make sure that is friendly accessible. Yeah, because like I say, I mean, you don't want to put yellow and green, light yellow and light green, because even I find it hard to read. And there are organizations that make use of screen reader as well. So make sure that accessible label is enabled. Always tell the user what the app is doing, because I for myself, if I gonna click a submit button and when it's loading, I don't know, and it's just stuck there, I will thought that the app doesn't work, and I'll just turn it off, right? So always have a loading bar. Always tell the users what the app is doing. Interact with the users. So those are some of the things that I think is important in app design. or like you have any, because you have built a lot of apps yourself, so you might have some useful things to add here.
Okay. Sometimes, thank you so much, Il. And then this whole talk is, I'm just evaluating myself. I'm a bad color user. And then, when we're talking about team and branding, I was just asking myself, one of the things I used to do before is for every button I had, I would have to give them different colors. I don't have a team. I don't have a branding.
Yeah.
And
But it's
then
painful when you change it, right? When you modify, you have to modify every button.
yeah, exactly. And those were the pain points that I went through every time I'm trying to modify things. I have to go back to all those buttons one after the other and change them. And some other time, I started using Team. There's a Team part in Power Apps that I can apply a team. And I so much love that. So when I apply that team, it applies to every component of the application. When I insert a
Yeah.
new button, the button inherits that particular color. When I click on an icon, the icon inherits the defined color for that particular team. And for the very first time, I saw how that can save time and how that can deliver a sort of a general, look and feel for the application, no conflict anywhere. And that makes me completely align with you that, okay, team and
Yeah.
branding has a lot to do. And accessibility, I'm learning afresh, honestly. I never paid attention to it. When I build application, I will see under the app checker, we see some warnings, and I will see
Yeah.
34 warnings, and I'll check, am I doing something wrong? Formula is right, functions is right, everything is right. I will see accessibility 34. I just no.
Ignore.
I'm not,
Ignore.
I'm not coming there. I'm not going there. So, but
Yeah.
I will definitely
I
start
made
paying
a
attention.
mistake as well. Yeah. I'm guilty of that as well. It's funny because I think a lot of people do not realize accessibility checker they didn't even realize the accessibility section itself, because it doesn't stop you from publishing the app. It's not an error, right? Like you said, it's a warning. So we tend to just ignore warning because it's just warnings. Let's get done with the main thing first. Yeah. One more thing is, I think the best way to do a design is if you look at other apps, look at how other apps are built. So I like to copy design of other apps, just take something similar, the look and feel, and you kind of, yeah. So moving on to the next slide, I think we're going to talk about some of the storyboarding tools. So like I mentioned just now, it's important to kind of just simply draw it out or write it out, how the app layout looks like. For example, a listing screen, because in Canvas app, a listing screen can have many look and feel, right? Even though just a gallery, it might have a photo, it might not have a photo, it might have 5 columns with an arrow button or icon or 3 separate columns, show and hide. So it's good to have put it up in the simple storyboarding where you could actually show it to a user and say, hey, this is how it look like, and you come to agreement on some of the business logic on the show height, on the flow, and etc. So these are some of the tools that you can use. There's the Adobe tool, which is really awesome, but I don't use it because it's actually paid. You can get a free one, or if you actually have a license, it'd be great. PowerPoint is a good way to start, though PowerPoint is a bit difficult because when you draw arrows and views and stuff on PowerPoint, it's just you have to align it and all. I just find it very cumbersome. It took me a long time to do it. Miro is great. Like Miro is very easy to use. I'm not sure is there a free account for Miro. There probably is, but limited to just one board, which means that you only can have. So Miro comes in board. You can create multiple boards. Board as in like a page. You can only have one page, but I guess you can always reuse it because you can save it as a picture and then just erase it and recreate it again. You want to use the free one, or we can just go back to the traditional way, pen and paper. There's no harm however you do it, however you sketch it on a whiteboard, just as long as you have the flow, and it also makes it easier during development process. So when you build, you know what you're building, you know what you miss out, you can point every picture to the requirement, and you just have a better picture. Unless you're someone who can picture everything in your head, then maybe it works for you, right? But you're not building app for yourself. So it's just good to everyone to be on the same page with this.
I completely agree with you. In fact, and I think that leads us to the topic of wireframe. Something as simple as this. Even if you can't do the UI UX design to replicate, but know how the screen transition. Okay, when you register, it should load. It should like you have here. So I agree with you.
Yeah, so this is a very simple one. Like we're not talking about complex. If you've seen what UI designer does, is massive, right? But for us, mostly we just want the flow. If you can't do something like that, just even just write it out, and whatever works for you. Yeah. So I guess that's the end of my requirement tips.
Yes, and it's been a whole expository journey and learning one for me. It's been fun, seeing those mistakes I often make when building applications and learning how to avoid them now, things to pay attention to, and what to do to, formalize what I do, especially the different stages when it comes to design process. It is very important. I want to say very big thank you, so the next series we're going to be touching base with governance. So governance is a very interesting topic, and I'm also interested in learning about it.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Ola. I had a really fun time discussing this with you. I've learned a lot from you as well, and I hope probably all the audience that watch it will share us their experience and best practice as well. So we all learn and grow together.
So please feel free to comment, pass comment, tell us what you're learning here, tell us things so that others can learn, through what you often do, and maybe help to better understand the message you are passing across in this video series. Thank you, and bye.
Thank you. Bye.